Good afternoon. Welcome to First Congregational Church of Norman. If you're here in person or on YouTube, no matter where you are, no matter who you are on life journey, you are welcome here. So now is the time for announcements. The first announcement I have is be sure and tear off the communication card in your bulletin. If you don't want to put anything more than just your name, that's fine, but whatever question you have or concern, just write it down and put it in the offering basket as it passes you by. Are there other announcements? Yes, sir.
Well, Sally for a visit. Her daughter said that she's just on a trip, so we'll have to leave it off. You should know that the Raise the Wage people have declared they have provided some signatures that they need for the petition, and they will be filing tomorrow. And the arena vote. The city's vote is currently under a injunction that often. I read the pleadings in case he will eventually cancel the vote completely. Now that will take it back to the council, which will vote 6-3 to approve the arena. However, I am told that a referendum petition is in the works. So, as soon as they vote that, they will have a referendum petition, and we will pass that around. Assuming that goes well, I have heard a small word of alarm that the election will not be held until November 5th for the presidential election. So, that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you. Other announcements? Yes.
This is just a heads up for anybody bringing styrofoam. The Lutheran Church had their styrofoam compactor in for repairs or maintenance, and they are now working on a backlog, and so they will not be accepting new styrofoam until the end of the month. And so, if you can store it in your house for a little longer, because we're running out of space at ours.
Thank you.
And there is still some room in the office, but just so y'all know. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other announcements? So we move on to joys and concerns. I want to express a concern that Robin sent to all of us as his congregation, and it reads as such. I wanted to add my prayers to those of so many Americans who know that political violence has brought us to the edge of the abyss. Too many guns, too much hatred, and now the fate of the country we love hangs in the balance. We don't know what happens next, but we do know that violence is never the answer, only the cause. Peace be with you, my beloved community. There is no other way. Other joys or concerns? Yes, Betsy.
Express joy and gratitude to the fact that our superintendent of Norman Public Schools is now saying that we will not be putting Bibles in every classroom. We are teaching that we have our curriculum and our standards, and I was really proud of him for taking a stand on that. It's not his typical style, and that's good news for Norman Public Schools.
For the joy of a school superintendent standing up for what he believes and a lot of people believes is the right stance, let the people say, thanks be to God. Are there other joys or concerns? Yes, John. Dave.
I'll do it as a joy, but really as an announcement. There are a couple of cards back here. We were a little late for getting here today. There's cards back here. It's a good way for us to extend our thoughts and care about other members. Sally Church's 90th birthday is the 23rd of this month, so there's a card back here for people to sign. And then Kathleen Anderson just had knee replacement surgery. She's doing well. She's still in Florida. She's missed the last 2 summers staying in Florida. So I guess the joy of Sally and Sally's birthday and Kathleen's successful surgery, and if you don't mind sign the cards on your way out.
Thank you. Other joys or concerns? If not, before we ring the singing bowl, I just want to introduce our speaker, who you all know, Kiegan Ryan, who is a graduate of Oklahoma City University with a bachelor in music, and he's now in the master's program for composition. He's from Broken Arrow, and I would also introduce him as what I have come to worry about, one of the very few sane people in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. So we're pleased to have a sane person from that community here. Okay, so let's prepare ourselves for worship with the ringing of the singing bowl. All those that are able, please stand and join me for the call to worship. You are beloved, and you are welcome here. 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 And if you can remain standing, we'll sing hymn number 472.
God, it seems that at this time we're at a standstill. We don't know what the right way is forward. It seems that we have forgotten to live and lead in love. We fail to take time to understand those who are different from us, and instead of living and leading and understanding, we choose to be content and ignorant sometimes. But I pray that understanding and joy and peace can be brought to all of us in times where we don't know what's going on, we don't know what tomorrow looks like, we don't know what's coming next. I pray that we love and we always love and we never forget the love that has been given to us. And I hope it inspires the love that we can give unto others. And hopefully we will know what tomorrow can be like as long as we have a dream for what tomorrow can look like, as long as we remember love and remember to lead in it. And now to pray as our Savior Christ has taught us. Our Creator, who is in heaven, holy is your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Do not let us fall into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For you reign in the power that is love, now and always. Amen. Good afternoon, everyone. As said, you all know me as the person who plays cello and sings some pretty songs, and I hate to inform you, but I may be the only sane person from Broken Arrow. That's why I had to get out. So thank you for having me here, Norman. Today, I want to talk about something that I think is extremely relevant to the longevity of the church. It's something I have noticed. I have spent at least a decade now in church music. I started off as a Southern Baptist in Broken Arrow. So yeah, we're in quite a different spot than where we are now, being at a congregational church in Norman. So I've witnessed a lot of different perspectives on what Christendom means. And today I want to share my reflections as being a member of Gen Z. We'll talk about what does that even mean, who is Gen Z, other than some headline about us not wanting to work. So I will talk about a little bit about who we are, and why we face the problem we have today. There is a stark issue and belief difference that is happening generationally, and it's being taken out politically, and it's being taken out in the church. And I hope to at least inspire some understanding of where the current generations, millennials included, and Gen Alpha, those younger than me, to have a little bit of perspective of why young people are leaving the church. I left the church for a little bit. Growing up in a nationalistic context of church, I was sitting I would like to sit in the back over there whenever I was at the Southern Baptist Church, and I heard Brother speak from the pulpit about how America is the new Jerusalem, and that we must fight to protect the historical America because it's for Christ, and that we are a Christian nation. I was 14 years old sitting there listening to that, and I left the Southern Baptist Church during 2020, during the Black Lives Matter movement. It was a horrific time to be someone who is of mixed ancestry, someone who is on the LGBTQI, I identify with that community. It was a tough time. And I had to leave for a little bit because me and other people like me, or people different than me, we were bullied from the pulpit. And so I want to take some time to look into other people's perspectives, to look into my own, and see what we can do as a church that's facing closing doors and a lack of attendance. The first thing I want to talk about is, who is Gen Z? We hear it a lot. We really don't know who they are. You may have heard us be called the iPhone generation, I remember being able to use a computer at the age of 4 years old. So it's a little bit different. But when I'm talking about Gen Z, I'm going to be referring to people born from between 1997 to 2010-ish. And I just want to list some formative experiences about what coming into the world has looked like for us. I am born in 2002, but I have been born into a world that is post 9/11. I start school with the 2008 recession and banking crisis. As I move on, I am almost the same age as when Parkland happened, the school shootings. I was the same age as Sandy Hook. So throughout my life, I've had these experiences of school shootings, financial troubles, and terrorism and the war on terror to grow up with. As I graduate high school, I graduate to a screen with COVID-19. I come into adulthood with extreme polarization throughout our country, both through the cultural and the political fabric. I have come into age of being a full-fledged adult, whatever that means, with the police brutality. I remember being in middle school when marriage equality was decided by the court. And I remember being in the pulpit as that's being discussed. And now we look to political violence. We look into genocide in Palestine. And so one thing that Gen Z has been searching for is an authoritative voice who takes action. As we go through, if we look at the cultural makeup of Gen Z, 52% of Gen Z is white, 25% is Hispanic, 14% is black, 6% is Asian, 5% is other, but over 30% of Gen Z identifies as LGBTQ+. So given this information, America to me looks a lot different than America looked 60 years ago or even 25 years ago. A majority of our generation agrees with the concept of an activist government, a government that has the authority to take a hold of the issues and to solve them. Instead of letting them go by, we want the government to solve them. And I think this translates to the church as well. I think a lot of us have the expectations for such a cultural institution as the church to go ahead and help solve the problems that we're facing in society. We are facing wages not rising. We're facing higher rates of poverty. We're facing high rates of police brutality, and we're still questioning if certain people who look different than us are entitled to the same rights as everybody else is, as guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution. And with my experience in the Baptist church, I have seen the church be a bully instead of being an advocate. And there are many others who come from the same experience I did. They told me growing up to read the Bible. Well, I did. And that's why I left. How are you going to teach love? How are you going to teach compassion but hate the person who lives right across the street from you? How are you going to say you have conviction and that you are the representative of God, but you kick down others and step on others in order to advance yourself? I had to leave the church because I loved the church. And I've been in quite a few of them. I was in the Southern Baptist Church. I got my first job as a choral singer in an Episcopalian church, and it was quite a cultural shock to me. I go from 2.5-hour preacher sermon on Sunday, maybe hour and a half Sunday school, to going to a church where the deacon is a gay man who was married in the church and our priest is a woman. I said, this is a good change. It was a large cultural shock for me. So when I moved to school, I took time from the church. When I moved to Oklahoma City, going to OCU, it is a Methodist institution, and it is supported by the Methodist Church, but it took me a little bit longer until I went to the Methodist Church, and I was there as a cellist and as a vocalist. And after that, 2 years later, I'm here now with you guys here at First Congregational Church of Norman, and I'm also at St. Patrick Catholic on 17th and Portland in Oklahoma City, and I'm currently doing an internship at First Presbyterian Church of Edmond. So no comment. So I have seen a lot of different churches and a lot of different belief sets and a lot of different practices within Christendom. And it's led me to believe that we just simply do not understand each other. You know? As Roberta Katz from the Stanford Report, she's a senior researcher can't read my own chicken scratch. She's a senior researcher at the Center of Advanced Study in Behavior Sciences. She describes Gen Z, in summary, a typical Gen Zer is a self-driver who deeply cares about others, strives for a diverse community, is highly collaborative and social, values flexibility, relevance, authenticity, and non-hierarchical leadership. And they are also dismayed about inherited issues like climate change and have a pragmatic attitude about work that has to be done to address those issues and the work surrounding it. I genuinely believe that people my age, we're not afraid to face the issues. We're not afraid to walk away. We're not afraid to advocate. And that's why the departure of affiliated religion is hard for us. 40% of Gen Z isn't affiliated with any institutional religion at all. And the numbers within the church are declining as well with each passing generation. And I want to take a moment and discuss why that is, you know. I wanted to be a minister growing up. You know, being a Southern Baptist minister and being a gay man don't necessarily work well together, you know. And so it took me a lot of learning. And I had to use the Bible to justify my right to exist. I'm going to tell you a quick story about one time while I was in the Southern Baptist Church. I was still 14 years old. It was right before I left. And I looked up, and our pastor brought people on stage with cardboard signs, holding them up like this, talking about which sins they have been liberated from. And I had been studying, and I had been learning, and I had been praying for this part of me to go away, to vanish. I loved God more than that. And I watched as this woman went on stage holding up a sign saying that she prayed her lesbianism away. And I cried. I cried because I had did the prayers, I had walked the walk, and I had talked the talk. I read all that I needed to, and it never went away. And I said, why would God do this to me? I want to be with God. I want to be with Jesus. Why was this thrown to me? And why can I do anything about it? But I get to watch a woman on stage who goes up there and proclaims that she was able to pray it away. Do I not care enough? Do I not believe enough? Do I not have enough conviction for this belief system? Is God not with me? I had to grapple with that, and it led me down a dark path of me praying to God that I would no longer exist, towards suicidal ideation. It led me down a dark path of me having to use the Bible, having to use Scripture, having to use talks in order to justify my right to be alive. It's painful, and there are millions of people, and a lot of young people, who have this experiencing, watching the church fail to take action on issues that are extremely relevant to us. It seems that we care too much about the afterlife, but you know, if God wills it, I'm going to be here for a lot longer than just a few years. I'm scared about things like climate change. I'm scared about polarization. I'm scared about a country that doesn't know where it's going. I'm scared about the rise. I'm scared about the rise of hate crimes against LGBTQ people that have spiked after trends of it going down. I'm nervous about what comes from the church. I'm nervous from what comes from the government. I'm scared to realize that I'm 22 years old. I don't know what direction this country is going in, and an election could determine if people like me or myself, my family, if they have a right to enjoy society like everyone else, and to see the church be an active pursuant of that coming from the evangelical side. It's scary. It's really scary. And I've had some pretty tough talks because I've talked to my friends about this sermon, or this talk, you know, because it's intimidated me. I have had to hide a lot, and I still hide a lot about who I am, about who I love, my relationship, about my family, because I recognize the circle in which I find myself in. And so I'm glad to be able to share this message, but there are consequences for me in the other churches I go to. And I hope nothing comes out of it, but there is a possibility. And the fact that I have to weigh this possibility in order to speak about a problem that has affected a lot of us, I think speaks a lot to the current state of the church that we are in. And I'll have to keep you guys updated, but I felt I needed to speak about this regardless of the consequences. And so I want to take us to Matthew chapter 7. We're on the Sermon on the Mount. And I'm going to read two different passages. Do not judge others, and you will not be judged, for you'll be treated as you treat others. The standard you use in judging is the standard by which you will be judged. And why worry about a speck in your friend's eye when you have a log in your own? How can you think of saying to your friend, let me help you get rid of that speck in your eye, when you can't see past the log in your own eye? Hypocrite! First get rid of the log in your own eye, then you will see enough to deal with the speck in your friend's eye. Don't waste what is holy on people who are unholy. Don't throw your pearls to pigs. They will trample the pearls, then turn and attack you. I really resonate with the last part of this. Don't give to pigs what is holy, you know. I got in a little bit of trouble the other day. I'm not going to reveal too much detail since I still am actively in this situation, but I was discussing with someone who has leadership within a church about the idea of putting the Bible in the school and forcing it to be taught. Putting our faith in public display like that, but as an act of force and not as an act of love. And he told me, he said, I understand why they're doing that, because the formation of our law is in Judeo-Christian values. I wanted to say, well, this is a secular government. Feel free to have those beliefs just as I do, but I'm not going to force them onto anybody else. That's what I wanted to say. But what I said was, how do you not see that as degrading God? We shouldn't roll around in the mud and use force to make people comply with what we believe. We've done too much of that already, and we still continue to do that. And I looked at him and I said, I'm a huge believer of give to God what is God and give to Caesar what is Caesar's. That's all I really had to say in that context. Why would you take God and use Creator as an object of force against others instead of allowing the teachings and the love and by your own example to lead? It's one of the most critical lessons I have discovered when I spent my time in the Episcopalian Church. They don't actively proselytize, or at least the one I was didn't. They said, we do these things just because we want to, not because we have the expectation of anyone following us as a result from it. And so as a member of Gen Z, as a member of a generation that is highly politicized, as a generation that is continuing the trend of having the most amount members of a generation have college degrees, have media literacy, we see these institutional failings, we see what the church promises, we see what we were taught in your Sunday schools, we see what we were taught from the pulpit, and we decided to live it out, but without the idea of the institution. And I think community is beautiful. We need more community, especially as a consequence of COVID, as a consequence of social media, and as a consequence of all the electronic media surrounding us and overtaking more and more of our lives. We need to have community, but we have decided, a lot of us, 40% of us have decided that it is too dangerous to have community with a group of people who are supposed to have the ideals in us than to be alone, to face life alone. And so what do we do as a church about that? We have a generation that's expecting the church to do something. So what do we do? I haven't quite found the answer to that, because every community has its own different needs, its own different priorities, and it's up to community members within where they are at to really hear what the people are needing and to see what is going on around them. And not to get glory for God or to make ourselves feel better that we are believing in the right thing, but to simply just love, you know? And it brings me to my second reading from Matthew 7. This is one I've grappled with a lot. I've had it used against me as someone who says I'm a Christian and I'm what the Bible quote unquote doesn't agree with. Well, I'm sorry you don't agree with it or you think it doesn't exist. I'm perfectly alive, 6'2", standing. I do exist, Beware of false prophets who come as harmless sheep but are really vicious wolves. You can identify them by their fruits, that is, by the way they act. Can you pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? A good tree produces good fruit, and a bad tree produces bad fruit. A good tree can't produce bad fruit, and a bad tree can't produce good fruit. So every tree that does not produce good fruit is chopped down and thrown into the fire. Yes, just as you can identify a tree by its fruit, so you can identify people by their actions. There was a spike, and I think Robin had talked about this, a spike in the amount of young people after Ryan Walters' attack on non-binary and transgender individuals. There was a spike in the emergency helpline. And we are allowing this man to parade our faith as a means of force and violence. By any means, how is that good fruit? How is the traditional teaching good fruit that we are allowed to alienate others? We are here to make them feel less than. How do we cut that tree out and throw it into the fire so that we can have good fruit and good trees? There has been a huge spike. And I gave you my story of young LGBTQ people, young Gen Zers who look for answers in the church but find destruction instead. So where do we find the good fruit? What do we do? As I prayed earlier, we don't know what tomorrow looks like, but at least we can understand. We can take time to understand. There are a lot of people around you. You may not hear it, you may not know it, you may not see it, but people who are your nieces and nephews, your children, your grandchildren, the way our country is set up, we're struggling and we are alone in a lot of these aspects. We do not have an authority. We do not believe that a single party is going to save us. And now, as time goes on, we don't even believe that the church will save us. I don't talk about this issue as a means of being to look down. I do it as a plea for help. I'm one of the few practicing Christians that I know, and most of my friends, and I'll read you some people I've talked to and I've met about this. I'll read you their testimonies, and it all leads back to being bullied by the pulpit. It comes back to feeling neglected and forgotten. And when I talked to them, I said, I know it's difficult. I've been there with you. A lot of others have been there with you. But what I always like to tell them is, God came for the weary, for the poor and broken in spirit. I've looked at them and I said, you know God in a different level because you are one of the people that God came for originally. It's easier to have a different idea of God when God has been used as a weapon against you. You have a different understanding, you have a different look at what compassion and mercy really means once you're able to differentiate between Sadducees and Pharisees teaching modern law and those who genuinely love and care and feel and have compassion and who are there with you. As we move forward, we have to remember a generation that has grown up with a lot of baggage. And every generation has baggage that comes with it. That's not what I'm trying to say. But coming from a generation that's only experienced violence and is going to experience more violence, what do we as the church do? I urge you to check on the younger members of your generation. or of my generation, of your communities. There's a lot of women my age who are afraid. There's a lot of minorities who are afraid. Everybody is afraid about what the financial future is going to look like for us. We're afraid. We're afraid, and we're afraid. But I know that there are tools and that the institution of the church can recover from this. Because everything we genuinely need in order to solve these problems come from here. And as far as I'm aware, we're all really well acquainted with it, and we all talk about it on Sundays for the most part. So I want us to remember, and you are all very well aware that the pulpit is powerful. The church is powerful. And the members of the church are very powerful in shaping what churches around us say and do. That's why I'm comfortable being here. I'm comfortable being here 4 p.m. on a Sunday because I know that who is ever here or whoever is there is never going to use this as a means of talking down to me. This church is an example of what we should do throughout Christendom. The first moment I came here about a year ago now, I felt welcome from the get-go. My friend Elena, when she came here and we played a trio together with Marilyn, she felt welcomed here. We felt safe here. So whatever this church is doing, it has the answers. It has a lot of the answers. But what I genuinely think is going to help us moving forward is having the uncomfortable conversations. I've been told from a very early age that life is contingent on how many uncomfortable conversations you're willing to have. And so I ask that believers, Christians, those who love, those who have a good heart, it's time for us to have the uncomfortable conversations. It gets you a lot of dirty looks. Trust me, when you're talking about equality at the Southern Baptist Church during the BLM movement, I can tell you it's not necessarily the friendliest faces you see. But it's important. I love God and I love the church way too much to allow a sect of the government, to allow a certain way of thinking to pollute what we have. And so I urge you to have the uncomfortable conversations. And I urge you to pray for the life of the church. I ask you to pray for the lives of young people, regardless if they step into the church or not ever again. And hopefully we can hear their stories and we can learn from them. I want to take this time to finish up, and I'm going to read 2 testimonies I got. This one's labeled, "Why the Church Just Isn't For Me." The philosophies and teachings found within the Bible and the story of Jesus Christ has always had a special spot for me. I believe the church provides a unique opportunity for communities to build in safety and unity. However, the path of modern Christianity has proved to be only selfishness. The modern day church is so divided and nonsensical, I question whether we are dealing with religion or a gas station. Regardless, the modern day church is too comfortable teaching and operating within ignorance and complacency. The church has been too comfortable far too long, so it seems on encroaching upon politics and education, especially within this state. This isn't what God intended. The church needs to learn to bring their congregation's attentions to injustice which is rampant throughout this age. Why is the church so comfortable in ignoring the state of our world, our youth, and our society? The church has long been too forced and ran with its own self-interest in its pockets. My experience growing up within a Catholic primary school and then to a Methodist church were quite contrasting at times, but one thing was for certain: I was an other to both groups. As I grew and began to understand, being alone to a 15-year-old, or being born to a 15-year-old felon, addicted mother didn't really help my case. I spent 6 years within an education system funded by the church. I saw and experienced rampant bullying and lack of disciplinary actions for such, especially with the children that were a part of the parish. I experienced harder discipline for the people of color, for the Jewish students, and the non-parish members. The church failed me in my hopes of being accepted by the church, being its educators, parents, priests, and fellow children. I have one more. I grew up in a small country Presbyterian church and had a relatively happy childhood. I went to church every Sunday, and my family was very involved in the community. When I was in middle school, several members of my family tragically passed. Afterwards, the culture at my church shifted dramatically. My mother and I were berated like outcasts. We no longer felt at home there. I couldn't understand why people who claimed to follow the teachings of Jesus Christ could treat people so cruelly. I became very interested in reading the Bible and the history of Christianity because I longed to understand what it all truly meant. In high school, I started attending a Baptist church with my friends from school. I was very involved there for 4 years, playing in their orchestra and singing in the choirs. During my time there, I was put in many situations I was uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable being in around the male youth group leaders, and I was asked to divulge details about my personal traumas to be used in sermons shared with the entire congregation. I stopped going to church when I went to college because I was tired of being treated poorly by people who claimed to care about me. At this point in my life, I do not plan on going back to the church due to my traumatic experiences and sensitive feelings surrounding this institution. I am better off doing my best to live a happy life and follow my own moral code, which is to treat people as you want to be treated. Show kindness and forgiveness and do my best to spread positivity wherever I go. And those are the two that I collected, but I had a lot of similar conversations to that. And I hope more churches can adopt the community and the compassion that we have here. It's a very real problem, and it's only going to get worse unless we do something about it, but I have faith that we can, and that there are more communities like us here who are not afraid to speak, who are not afraid to get backlash from saying something's wrong. That's what I loved about this church. The first time I came here was hearing Robin speak and say, this is wrong. And he's not afraid to say, I wish more churches were like that when I was growing up. I wish more churches took the time and more congregations took the time to understand. And I hope that you guys here that your friends, your family members, other people in churches who may not necessarily agree with you can understand the light that you are being to Norman, that you are being to Oklahoma City Metro, and that you're being to Oklahoma and to the United States at large. I hope they can see that and they can learn something. I want to thank you guys for allowing me to speak on this. I know it necessarily doesn't have a happy ending, but that doesn't mean there can't be a happy ending to come from it. I believe there can be and there will be. I eventually came back to the church after some soul searching. Granted, the cello and singing made it easier, but I did. And I know others can do the same, and I hope that when these people come back to give it another shot, that they can find congregations as I have found here. Thank you. For this next gift of music, we have Amazing Grace, but I'll be singing it in Cherokee.